And you're like,
This is the Senate Transportation Committee, and we are Thursday, the 10th of April. And we are here to take testimony on 488 T-bill. And we have the agency with us in Jeremy Reed, and you're on, Jeremy.
Thank you. Jeremy Reed, Chief Engineer for the agency. So the agency would propose some language to the P-bill that would compel 3 studies. And the genesis of this,
3 studies.
well, 3 reports, 2 studies, 3 reports.
Usually complain about.
Well,
Now
it beats the alternative in the moment. So, essentially there's, emphasis or desire to look at town highway needs and funding. And I think that's across the board. So what we've done is we've broken it into 3 segments, and I'll just quickly walk through those. The first, and we briefly discussed this upstairs in the house, but the municipal payback provisions and any related keyboard changes. And so principally these would be municipal assistance projects that don't progress for any number of reasons. Before IIJA, Federal Highway had a very consistent decades-long process of their own that said, at various intervals, if you do not progress with the project, you need to pay us back. And our grant agreements to the towns and the statute reference Federal Highway language. With IIJA, that language was softened. And concurrent with that, we obviously saw a bunch of inflation, which made progressing some of these projects more difficult. So our intent would be to look at the current status and devise statutory language that clarified and provide some specificity on what the payback provisions would be for municipalities when they did not continue to progress the project. And we think a report in January 15th of 2026 would achieve that objective. We have run this language past BAPTA and RPCs, and they had some minor corrections, but we think, or minor edits, and we think those edits could be addressed in the report and don't necessarily need to be part of T-bill language at this time. The second piece to this is essentially a little bit of what we were talking about Tuesday, I believe, which is what is the current state of the highway network and what are the resources needed to maintain that network. So we've broken it into a couple different pieces. One would be a study to look at what sort of asset management and inventory would be appropriate for municipalities, and to what extent the towns could use the state sort of technical expertise to do that. The second piece would be similar to this year's funding study, a funding study that focused on town highway infrastructure and in some way projected what the funding needs would be long term. We're not sure how we would do that because we don't know what the asset condition is at this point, and we don't have deterioration models. But I think part of the study could be taking a sample size and then extrapolating that over the entire state. And so there is a typo for that. We do think that's a fairly intensive study. So we would ask that we report back in January of 2027 on that. Potentially, if the committee desired, we could do the asset management piece by next year, which would be just what sort of inventory control could we help the town stand up. But I definitely think the funding piece would need a couple years of effort.
So we are figuring out basically the need and creating a snapshot of where we are with bridges, culverts, signals, signage, pavement, and highway facilities. And then analyzing the risk to municipalities and the state under the currently funding mechanism. I think the ultimate goal here should be that we take all of the asset management work that we do and the studies that we do at the state level, and we plug that in the front side of what is needed for funding.
For the state system.
And and I'm going to say this is a wild, the fundamental change that I think needs to happen in what the difference in what we do for the town is we incorporate our funding streams to address the needs that are out there. And the most prominent need that is out there. I guess what I'm saying is I want the need that's out there to drive the funding stream.
And I think, to your point, the first piece of this is an inventory of what's out there.
Yep. And
once towns have that, then we can start predicting or extrapolating what the need would be.
I'd almost like to say right in the front of it's the intention of this to get to a place where we look at funding the funding stream differently than we do now.
Okay.
When I have structures and I have the class 2 roadway and we do the grant programs back to the towns now, we tell towns, each individual town, you're going to get money it's historically been once every 3 years and you can get this grant. I'm just thinking, and I know a couple of town roads in my area. Well, I'll use one on the other side of my county, the North Wolcott Road. Very as important to Craftsbury, Wolcott, and a lot of trucks trying to avoid driving clear to Hardwick down a state highway, then getting on 15 and going back. The shortcut comes down through. Well, it's, any culvert on that road really affects kind of the whole region and particularly the trucking that goes down through. And if we had a better handle on need and what the needs are in the area, we might start redirecting a formula to say, what's the priority roads that are state roads? And should we not do that culvert, even though it's more expensive but put us in a position where we're more strategic about the money statewide.
So if I'm interpreting that correctly, almost establishing a system based on regional value that I won't say recategorizes roads, but somehow alters the priority and beyond just the town's funding ability, but the actual impact to the region.
Yeah. And we do a formula that directs whatever amount of money we put in, and we're probably never going to have enough money to really address all of their needs and know that. But we do a funding system that is the problem I have with what is in and the work that the towns did, that the House did on that. I appreciate the work but it's all based on a percentage increase that I have no idea what you base that off on other than the previous year's funding. And I'm really not clear that what we do is we pick out in a region, what's the most important thing to do?
I don't believe I don't believe we do. I think it's what the town desires to do at this point.
Yeah, in an isolated town, in a single place, and then it's not like this road is important.
Right.
And how do I get, this is a good start, but additionally, I want to see what the needs are and what is important regionally start to come into our thinking about the way we would strategically have the money.
So can I suggest, as opposed to having sort of the second part of this, trying to predict the funding needs, we develop a project prioritization process that looks at the region, not just an individual town's network?
Yep. And I think the regional planning commissions should help with that.
Yes. That was certainly the intent. Okay, so we will strike the funding prediction and look on a prioritization level.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are a handful of highways or town roads that run multiple between towns that really become, connectors within the state system that have a priority that are in. I want to make sure that we focus the money towards the stuff that makes the sense for us all.
Okay. So the third chunk of this somewhat ties into that, and this would be, I won't say a study, but a report that would look at, are we delivering town aid in an efficient manner? And so what we would do is look at, right now we've got the direct aid, right, which is the mileage based on the classification of the road. And then, as we just discussed, there's grants that towns get at some interval, whether it be 3-4 years. And the idea here is to investigate whether that administrative effort, towns have to fill out a grant application, put it in, our districts have to track and award those grants, and then there's some tracking associated with once they are given. And the question would be, is
Yeah, can't you tell them to come on in? You're gonna be upstage for.
okay, that's fine. As the low bar.
Happy that you have come on in. Yeah.
There's a lot. They come fourth graders from Union Elementary.
Oh, wow.
There's.
Just walked over. On down this side.
Come on,
On in, so you
Over
can all
here.
fit.
squeeze, all of you squeeze in.
We're told that there's not enough kids in the schools, but this looks like a good.
So, your mom was right there yesterday morning.
Yeah.
She's not here today though.
You guys can squeeze this thing too.
You covered it over here.
I think it's okay, they won't bite you. Come on. And look, you're on the camera.
Oh, you're on TV.
Yeah.
See it?
So who here had Mr. Reed in second grade?
This.
Mr. Reed in second grade? So that's my wife.
Only 2 people. Cool.
Nice, guys. So this is the Senate Transportation Committee. This is the chair of the committee, Senator Westman. He's kind of like our teacher. He's in charge of the room. So,
And I only do what our lawyer tells me.
yeah. So this morning we're talking about how to fix the roads. Do any of you guys have roads that have big potholes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, has anybody been on East State Street? This, how's East State Street? Do you like?
East State Street.
So.
Yeah, we're talking about how to, because we don't have a lot of money and the roads cost a lot of money to fix. So we're talking about how can we do it so that we help the most people who have to drive or walk or ride their bike down the road with the very little bit of money we have. So
Well, we got questions
Yeah.
here. We like that. You,
Eliza?
So for me, I have like a gigantic pothole right by my driveway to get up into my apartment complex. So I was wondering if maybe we can fix that. It's worse.
well, part of what we're talking about is helping towns with the money so they can do that, because where your apartment is probably the city of Montpelier. And that we in here are specifically responsible for the interstates, and, Route 2 and roads like that. But we do give towns and cities money to help them with their project. But that would be specifically city, but we would give them help to do that sort of thing. So, and I probably hit that pothole once or twice.
Yeah, you've got some questions behind you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
So, I only think I'm gonna do say. So, I have a steep hill on Wheelock Street, and it gets. Wait. You could start by at least repaving the road.
Yeah.
So,
We have another question.
Yeah.
yep, but before that, do you know who this is?
Oh,
This is Senator Perchlik, and do you know what county he's from?
Washington.
yeah,
He's from,
Washington.
so he's your senator.
he is your senator, yeah. So.
Have you got a question for Senator Perchlik?
Focus on fix my whole road because there are so many cracks. There are
Yeah,
like about 100 pops.
Just 100 bottles.
yes,
Can you count those for us?
No, 100 cracks.
Oh, 100 cracks?
yeah,
Yeah, that's why I scared me. You pave the road. Because
Yeah.
the asphalt.
yeah.
It's a cheap way. Why? No. It's the same.
Well, it's tough though. There's a lot of holes and they keep coming. And there's not a lot of money to do it.
Well, we struggle with that in here all the time.
Yeah,
And we also do, how many have seen the Amtrak train that runs up the railway?
yeah,
And how many here have ridden on that train?
Yeah.
We, we deal with the trains, we deal with planes, we deal with the roads that are out there. And we deal with public transit and the buses, so anything that deals with transportation that this committee would deal with.
yeah. Have you guys flown out of Burlington Airport? How many people have gone on a plane out there? So this committee helps make sure the airport gets the funding it needs. How many of you guys have ridden one of the buses around here? Not a school bus, but like a city bus or, yeah. Same thing, this committee helps make sure those buses get the money they need. Because they also need money and they don't get enough from what you pay to get on and off the bus.
Bike paths?
Bike path, yeah, how many of you guys have gone for a ride on the bike path?
Yeah.
Oh, that's another big one. Yeah, have you guys been on the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's,
Do you all like the Lamoille Valley? Lamoille Valley, I'm the senator from Lamoille, so that's the center of mine.
yeah,
Are there any potholes on there?
oh,
Probably not.
Well, actually, the trail is new.
Oh,
And,
yeah.
and we opened the trail and then flooding 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So we're almost taken care of for the flooding that took out Red Bridges, but it's not like we don't have our own issues.
Yeah.
Can I want to make a copy of the documents?
That's our schedule.
This is
Yeah.
I'm kind of
the
messy.
agenda today.
yeah,
So I walk by your school, I ran a house on Liberty Street. I walk by your school every day to come to work. So I get to see a bunch of you guys running in and out every day.
yeah,
Colin, did you have a question?
Yes, I think, if you guys don't have a lot of money to fix the roads, you could use like wood to put down,
Oh,
maybe.
you know, they used to do that.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
used to pave the roads with wood.
Or like gravel.
Well, and we
Yeah.
had covered bridges that are all.
Yeah, we still have some, yeah.
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 Where's that
Okay.
question?
One more question? Let's do one more.
Make the bridge on Granite Street wider.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not wrong.
You could.
Yeah,
This committee.
you could work.
yeah,
This would
Yeah.
be the place for you to go if you know what to
that's
do with
right.
the
You
road.
guys can run for state rep or state senate someday.
That's my mom to ask you.
You could, yeah. Some of you guys have parents who come in here who work for the Agency of Transportation, so. Yeah, Cohen's mom too comes in on rail projects,
Oh, awesome.
so, yeah, so yeah, you can talk to your parents, but yeah, you can work for the State Agency of Transportation too. Another great place to work on these things.
Yeah, and then we set you in the chair down there and you testify and
Right.
tell us what we're doing wrong.
Yeah.
Or vice versa.
The kids.
Great,
We're gonna do a.
Very nice.
We do
Yeah.
a mock committee where they get to role play and
very nice.
question, if we have time,
Great.
we'll see.
Well, thank you guys for coming in.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Can you say thank you? Very much.
Bye.
We don't get minimum wage.
Yeah, the legislators don't get paid a lot.
What is the point?
What is the point?
The question we asked ourselves.
You should get a raise.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Hal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's straight to
There's
the
a
point.
contingent that supports it, you know?
Thank you for the entertainment.
Thank you for having that, man. I appreciate it.
Oh,
Do you have fourth grade?
That my daughter was in that class, so she was being quiet, but she was wearing the UVM hat, so.
well, all through COVID, we got to see your daughter all the time. She'd be in the back of the screen running across.
Peeking over my shoulder. Those were the good days. The bad days were when there were tears and she was climbing in my lap. The kids were a lot younger then.
We during COVID, we got to see everybody's cat, everybody's kids, you know. All right,
Ready? So, yeah, so the idea would be, is there a way to, essentially roll the current grant structure into formula funds? The upside is it would reduce the administrative burden on both the towns and the state. And it would provide some level of predictability to the towns, what they would be getting annually. The downside to that would be that if the towns essentially did not take that money and put it in a reserve fund or whatever, when they did have a bigger project, a $300,000 or $400,000 project, there would not be that lump sum grant award. It would just come in bits and pieces annually. So again, this would just be an effort to look at the pros and cons of that and see if there's an appetite to move forward. The second piece to this, which is a little bit more complicated, would be to take all of the miscellaneous grant programs that are run through our Municipal Assistance Bureau and see if there's any efficiency to be had by either combining those, making the application process any simpler. And if there's, again, really just looking for administrative efficiency here, making it more predictable with process, making it a little bit more certain to towns of what their obligations are, the timeframes associated with it. So there is a nexus to the payback provisions as well. So those are the three studies / reports that we would be looking at that really drive to town highway aid in most aspects that the agency's involved in.
what do you think?
Sounds good if they wanna do the work.
But we'll do it.
Okay, I would on the second piece
Yes.
that, you know, if it would be in Senator Kirschlick's district, but, you know, for example, from Route 100, when, you get south of the village, going through Moscow and past the high school and then come back on 108. That clearly is something that relieves a lot of the pressure within Stowe Village. And somehow, I have a lot of sympathy for a community that gets stuck with these individual routes that are clearly town highway issues that provide relief along our system that really we ought to be prioritizing based upon traffic. And that, as I said, in Wolcott's crushed by the fact that the North Wolcott Road is a truck route that is very important to that part of the state and a number of towns in that region. And we have those roads all across the state.
Okay.
And they get treated the same way as everything else. And if those roads go down, you know, for example, if a culvert or that bridge going into the little village of Moscow and Stowe goes out, it puts a lot more pressure on the center of the village in Stowe. So how do we more effectively, you know, I could be right up front. I would like to see more money go to the towns in it. But how do we more effectively direct what we do already and going forward in the future? How do we narrow that? And I think we don't have that discussion.
Okay.
You know, I live just off from the Pleasant Valley Road and from, I would say from Jeffersonville to Jericho, where it dumps out a lot of people. That's the back way they take to go skiing, and takes a lot of pressure off from Route 15 in that. I think those somehow, whatever we do, and to make those communities sit there and wait 3 years to get a grant, it doesn't cover it. I think we have to look at those things.
Yeah, and I think we have those roads all over. I mean, my hometown of Roxbury, we've got Warren Mountain Road that it's a feeder to Sugarbush, but there's almost no Roxbury residents on it above a certain point, and it's a steep, you know, cutoff road. So I absolutely get the regional importance of some town highways versus others, and I don't think we in any way classify those today.
And
Certainly don't fund them any differently.
and certainly in the overall what we're doing, I'm not quite sure how we base our overall funding. It's based on the number from a year before, not what the need is out there.
Yeah, and I think we would continue to support the House version while these studies are being conducted, because certainly the funding side is
The House version meaning the
Correct.
inflation adjustment.
Yeah. While we're working to sort of essentially reimagine Town Highway 8.
That really is what I'd like,
Okay.
what my goal would be. Go ahead.
So, but did you say something about the second sentence of the objective of that one about the 2-year funding thing? You don't want to do that part?
I'm not sure, but I think the intent here is to reimagine the whole of how we fund to towns. The intent here is to look at it and say, what are priority roads within regions? How do we look at what towns are doing in the overall and start to inject in this conversation, what are their needs? and their needs based upon maintenance of an infrastructure that I think we all don't want to lose.
Well, I get that part. So there's the two parts, but I thought
Yep.
earlier you were saying don't do the second part.
Well, the way I interpreted it, please correct me, was in order to do the second part, the funding part, what we really need to do is come up with a prioritization process first.
Yeah.
So I think, the first part now would be the inventory kind of initial assessment / snapshot. 2, how do we prioritize roads on a regional basis? And then maybe the third part would be funding.
Yeah.
I don't believe we can do all that in 2 years, so maybe after we come up with a prioritization / assessment of the current conditions, then we can talk about what a funding study would look like if that's acceptable.
So you would change the date, you'd have multiple dates.
Well, what we would do is, have them sort of, work with our team to figure out, but I think initially we could come up with an assessment of current condition probably within a year. And then the prioritization would be probably January 2027 at the earliest. And then the funding would be after that, but I wouldn't want to include funding at this point, just
Okay.
given the number of variables and uncertainties. Because we could come back with that prioritization process and this body could be like, no, you totally missed the mark, and that would absolutely impact the funding.
And then on the data collection, this says condition, but I think from the conversation, we want to say the objective is not only condition, but the use. And use could be several things, which are going to affect the condition. So it's part of this is within a condition, but like the amount of use, so like the amount of cars, and then kind of this issue of something like Moscow Road or where it's a town road, but there's meeting a state need. So it's kind of something about the importance of it. Like, or if it was to go out, what would be the impact of the state system if this bridge went out? And then accident data.
Sure, and I think that's the prioritization process that we would have to establish, very similar to VPSP2. What is the accident data? What is the regional importance? What is the traffic? What are the what are the alternatives if this road is taken out?
That's just not talking about in this, yeah.
Correct. Yeah, so we'll have to do some pretty big changes to the second.
Yeah, it's like here, I go up Town Hill Road and there's lots of people, from here would go up Town Hill
Yeah.
Road to get onto Route 2
Yeah.
instead of using the state highway. So it becomes, if anything happened on the state highway, that's probably where you would, if flood came and washed out something in there, that's where you would direct traffic. That road becomes,
Right.
pretty vital,
Yeah. I mean, to some extent, what we're talking about is creating a fifth classification of road,
Yeah.
which would be like a class 2A.
Yeah.
Right, type of thing, where it would be a regional importance and state importance, but it's generally a class 2 town highway.
But where I
Do
live,
we already have those?
We get class 2 town highways, but I don't know that there's a separate classification.
Like Brook Road and Plainfield?
Well, that's an FAS road.
Okay.
So that's a Brook Road's actually probably a class 3 road, but it in some way got added to the federal aid
So
system.
that's just the federal stuff, that's not a state.
Right.
where I live in Pleasant Valley, when the Route 15 bridge floods every year, we have a couple times a year, every car on Route 15 travels and it is the bypass out around. Somehow, some looked at that. I think is important. Thanks. How do we, for me, it's how do we open up the conversation about what we're doing?
Yeah, and I think the reimagining piece, it is a bit of an elephant, and that's why our attempt was to break it into 3 discrete pieces. And this will be an undertaking for sure.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So we'll see these things in the new version of this bill.
I would hope so. And we might, Dr.
Yeah.
This
After-
a little,
after it.
number
Yeah.
2 a little more.
Yep.
Do we know where Senator White is?
I don't. Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we have our CFO here today. There were a number of questions that came up during Logan's testimony yesterday. And if you'd like to hear from her while, we have this moment, we'd be happy to. get
That would be
this.
great.
Thanks. Great.
Hi all, Candace Sanchez, Chief Financial Officer of the agency. I'm here to answer any questions you have today, but I also took note of questions that I might be able to answer from yesterday. So I will start with what I can answer from yesterday unless you want me to start with something specific, Sharon.
No, good. Go ahead.
Okay. There was a quick question yesterday about the T-bill authorizations versus appropriations. From what I've been able to gather from last year's bill, there are money sections in the T-bill that are authorizations. And then I think the appropriations committees, which is why the House Transportation Committee removed that section 13, typically like appropriations to be in the big bill. But to the question of why that one section 14 still remains in the T-bill, it's because it's an authorization, not an appropriation. That was just a clarification. Pay Act. There was a question on what Pay Act is.
Still thinking about your last.
Oh, okay. No, let me wait, because
But this is,
Here's for the
this was the one where we deleted that section of the 1.4 million or whatever for the charging stations that's going to ACCD. So it says
Right.
appropriating money to ACCD.
right. And to be clear, the agency does not care where appropriations
Yeah.
live. I was just explaining that section 14 remains in the T-bill because it's an authorization rather than an appropriation.
Authorization of T fund.
Authorization of an appropriation that already exists. So it's not new.
Well, was it the 14? I can't remember what it was.
14 was like 325,000 that is authorized to be used for a different purpose for drive for electric.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so because it's not new money,
Yeah.
it's not a new appropriation.
And all the other things that are in the T-bill are appropriations.
All of the other money sections in the T-bill right now are authorizations. But that's not to say that the T-bill couldn't have appropriations in it.
Is that, but are you saying that all the money that's in the T-bill are
Authorizations.
those, because it's already T-fund money that's came into the T-fund, so we're just authorizing how we're spending it. We're not appropriating it.
Exactly.
Right, we do this with the capital bill and the T-bill. So the money gets appropriated in the big bill. And it's broken out by large, broad line items, and then the transportation program in this case identifies what those line items are actually getting spent on, and we're basically saying, giving it the thumbs up, subject to potential modifications of, yes, we're authorizing you to spend X dollars on the list of projects that you put forward in the transportation program. Same way we do in the capital bill, where we say, you've got so much money, use it to, replace HVAC systems at these buildings, use it to construct a new structure here, et cetera. So it's just because the big bill doesn't go into that depth. This
Well, it does, but all that stuff is in the big.
it does, but it sweeps at a broad high level. And the transportation, the T-bill gets down to the granularity
The T-bill is in
of
the big,
authorizing it.
isn't it?
So the appropriations that fund the T-bill are in the big bill. The authorization of what to spend those appropriations on beyond
In the
the
T-bill.
large piece of we're putting X dollars towards maintenance or towards, and I forget the headings for each of those, but you know, B901, B902.
Yeah, wherever
Et
there's
cetera.
a sectional, there's
Right,
sections are appropriate.
The broad category of appropriation is in
yeah,
general, is in the big bill.
right. So then B902 was broken out into what we're actually saying that money is going to be spent on is broken out in your white book.
Okay. Great. There was a question on what Pay Act is. So Pay Act, is really a function of how we at the state of Vermont, budget personnel costs. We're told by the Department of Finance and Management how we budget personnel costs, and just at a very high level. The FY25 as passed budget is based on FY24 collective bargaining agreements. So it's the annualization of the prior year. And then any differences between the prior year and the current year is shored up in what is known as Pay Act, which is an appropriation that is held at the Secretary of Administration that they have authority to distribute. And that authority is given every 2 years. So it was in last year's budget bill and still applies to this year. It was in section G of last year's big bill. And the Department of Finance and Management reports on Pay Act distributions at the November JFC meeting.
So this is not Pay Act, but it does deal with in the big bill, we have a reserve at the bottom that deals with
The 27th pay period.
yeah.
It's my next one.
Oh, that's perfect. Go ahead.
Okay. So the 27th pay period, the next 27th pay period is expected in fiscal year 2033. Finance and Management reports annually at the September Joint Fiscal Committee meeting on that liability. And right now they reserve general fund against that liability. So the general fund portion for the FY23 2033 liability is 23 million. And if we apply the same percentage to the T fund that is used in Pay Act, which is 12%, then we would estimate the amount of T fund needed in 2033 is 2.8 million. And we would defer to Finance and Management on whether we budget that 2.8 million closer to 2033 or at another schedule.
It does come out of the T fund,
It does.
but they're just doing it for all. Finance and Management does it for all parts of the state.
Finance and Management places an amount for general fund for all of state government annually leading up, because the
That's what
amount
we're-
for general fund is a much bigger hit, I think.
Yeah,
That's what we're.
it's a much bigger hit, but we in this don't put away any money for that.
Correct.
This is just not that big compared to your end.
The agency doesn't, like transportation doesn't, we're agnostic. It would be the Department of Finance and Management.
And it's familiar with Pay Act. I think one of the things I just noticed that it was such a round,
Say it, which
that
one?
the Pay Act was such a round.
Yes, it is calculated by Finance and Management.
It doesn't seem like, it seems like an estimate or something, like it's, I remember other Pay Acts being down to the dollar, like it seems like 3 million, just like, well, we think it's gonna be around 3 million more than like actual calculation.
So in last year's G section, the Pay Act last year was 2.5 and the Pay Act this year is 3. And then allocations could be, it's up to 2.5 or up to 3. So it could be less than that.
Screwed up.
Yeah. So if we, as an agency, don't request the full amount of the estimate, then that can be used in reversions.
So back to that. So is the reason that the Agency of Transportation, unlike some other areas in state government, is that small? Each pay period, do you know what our checks are that go out from the Agency of Transportation?
Not I know what I need for the end of the fiscal year because that's the work that my team is doing right now, to estimate pay act, but I don't off the top of my head know every pay period. I could get back to you.
No, I'm just, so it's 2.3 million. And, I just,
Oh, yeah, because that's the estimate for the 27th pay period, so 2.8 million.
2.8. So you're really talking that each year, if it's 12 years that we're off in the future or whenever it is, we should be putting a couple $100,000 a year away.
I would defer to finance and management.
Yeah.
But we don't do that, do we?
But we don't do that,
No.
you know,
Okay. There was a question on the central garage transfer amount from the T fund. So that amount is in statute and it's a calculated field. For the past 2 years, the language was not withstood, which is why when you were looking in the operating statement yesterday, you saw zeros for 24 and 25. But that amount specifically goes per statute to equipment. Monies to acquire new or replacement equipment.
so are we putting any, oh, did you have a question? Are we putting any money away for the new, central garage here, away right now?
The complex you're talking
Yes.
about. Sandra. Yes. So, another part I had noted. So last year, Steve Bill authorized the use of up to 2 million central garage internal service funds for the Payne Turnpike property. And it also authorized the use of central garage ISF for design services. So to date, we have incurred design services and environmental permitting costs for the project. And we are hitting the FEMA IDT fund code for, as a July 2023 flood cost rather than the central garage ISF. And because this Payne Turnpike is as a result of, the 302 complex.
So it's FEMA money that we're mostly using.
So yes, we are in conversations with FEMA right now to receive revenue against the expenses occurred. So this project being an emergency flood project is how the Chief Recovery Office is handling like all other flood projects.
The property was purchased.
The land was purchased. Yeah, the land was purchased using the central garage ISF as specified in the T-bill last year.
And then I think when I read that statute, I wondered if that statute was written when we had the ISF, like, do we need both? Statutory requirement to put money in the central garage and an ISF that funds the central garage.
We need an ISF to fund central garage. We don't, you're asking about the transfer language itself for equipment?
Yeah, why do we have, I assume that was done when maybe the ISF wasn't in place, or maybe it was not enough or something, and the central garage was always running out of money, and was like, we have old trucks because we don't have any money. So we said, well, we're forcing you to put money in the central garage right now.
I wouldn't want to speculate because I don't know the history of the equipment, like the way that that Todd and Dave with our central garage fleet view the equipment statute that I just referenced is their equipment fund. And I view it in a very similar vein to like how the TIB works for bridge projects. Like we know that it's a separate pot of money that we really can only use for bridges. So this is the separate pot of money that we can only use for central garage equipment, but I don't know how it started. I do know that Todd and Dave like to know the amount that they have for equipment each year.
But it's a pretty big list. It's the equipment that's large for reading this, like included culverts and things. Fair market.
For central garage?
In that 19,
For the amount from the transfer specifically, it's only to acquire newer replacement equipment.
Just said it quick.
Mhm.
There's not a lot of us. It's pretty exceptional.
I can double check on that. I can double check.
It's okay, it doesn't matter. I just thought it was. I figured that's what the internal service fund was for, to replace equipment. But
The
we could do it either without that.
Yeah,
I'm not suggesting we change it. That was just my question.
the internal service fund is the operations of equipment that Central Garage provides to ourselves, to the agency. So it's operating as like a third party. But it doesn't. The fact that an amount to purchase or replace equipment is called out separately is just,
You could include it in that if you want.
it's all the same fund code. It's just the statute says this part of the fund code is gonna be for newer replacement equipment.
Sure.
Yes, you could send. Um. I can wait for the chair or keep going, whatever.
Yeah, keep going.
Okay, sorry. Debt service and the transportation fund.
Yep.
So I have an answer from finance and management that this is debt service on general obligation bonds. We
Yep.
did geo bonds, in 2003, 2004 and 2009, which is separate than TID bonds. And I don't know the timeline of which we will continue to have to pay debt service. I could come back to you on that.
Or what you were. Or what the projects were, you know.
They were in, capital bills for that year.
But I assume they were transportation.
They were transportation projects, and I do actually have the list, but I'll follow up with you if you're interested.
Then I wonder why would have we done that because we have like used all the TID funds. We said, oh, let's put it in the capital sale to fund these transportation projects.
I don't know.
We usually insure, we don't use all the TID funds.
But we're doing the, well, we don't, not the,
Well, we pay.
well, we're using it now
everything
just as a pay go, but.
Right, for pay-go.
But if we were gonna bond for a project, maybe the TID funds were at its max, so we had used them also. We went to the general obligation to the capital. Or maybe there was just a project where there was transportation connection to it. So it said, well, that part can be transportation.
Okay, the transportation fund balance chair, I know you asked yesterday, where we are right now. So the GovRec that was submitted and then the modification that was done to incorporate the 1.4 million appropriation to ACCD, which was an unintentional, leave off from the GovRec, that was balanced at 0.
Mhm.
So I understand that there are other legislative bills that may have a fiscal impact, right? S-123 and S-46.
Mhm.
We are, still analyzing those bills.
Okay.
Yeah. And then there were a lot of questions about reversions yesterday.
Mhm.
Okay, so the reversion process, there is language each year in the budget adjustment that allows the Secretary of Transportation to carry forward transportation fund, general fund, clean water fund, et cetera. But for our purposes, transportation fund, from one fiscal year to another. So that would be in the budget adjustment bill, or maybe in the budget in the C section that says at the authority of the Secretary of Administration, funds can carry forward from June 30, 25 to the next fiscal year. So how this plays out in practice is the Secretary of Administration consults with the Commissioner of Finance and Management, who has the authority over our transportation fund reserve balance. That reserve, I'll call it the budget stabilization reserve, because that's the official name. So the budget stabilization reserve can be no greater than 5% of appropriations. And historically, the Commissioner of Finance and Management has always gone to the maximum 5%. So then what happens is the Secretary of Administration will come to the agency and say, please match this reversion figure to get to this budget stabilization target. So that is happening July 15th to July 18th of every year. Are there any other questions on reversions or? Okay. I think that was it. But I'm happy to answer financial questions now or any other time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think we're gonna take, maybe a 15-minute break. And, then we'll be back a quarter after.